Hello from a Christmas lockdown, everyone. Today is a very momentous occasion for OTH Studios, as we will be bringing you the first ever Star Wars video. We will have a very detailed breakdown of all 10 Disney Investor Day Star Wars reveals, with insight from our very famous 4 special guests. So grab some popcorn, sit right back, and let's dive into this very juicy content. So, we are joined by Jack Fisher of Screaming Fish Productions once again. It's very good to have you back, Jack.
Hey, Ollie, good to be here. I'm so grateful to be here.
That's good. It's always good to have familiar faces at the studio, so we could not be happier. We are going to be beginning with Obi-Wan, a new series coming exclusively to Disney Plus in 2022. This will have returning performances from Hayden Christensen and Ewan McGregor. We'll also see the entire series directed solely by Deborah Chow, who did direct The Mandalorian Season 1, Episode 3, The Sin, and she also had a hand in the making of Mr. Robot, an Amazon Prime original. So some very good creative minds on here.
I am a really big fan of Ewan McGregor's Obi-Wan, so I cannot wait to see him return to this character, and it will also be really interesting to see what was going on with him between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope, and how he was kind of dealing with the aftermath of Revenge of the Sith. So that will be really interesting, and now with the added addition of Hayden Christensen coming back to play Anakin Skywalker again, it will be so cool to see how he deals with the aftermath of Revenge of the Sith. It will be really interesting to see how they build up to that conflict and how Obi-Wan will deal with knowing what Anakin has become. It actually does kind of make sense. I've heard a few people say that it doesn't really make sense that Obi-Wan and Anakin meet with each other between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope, and actually it does make sense, because in A New Hope, Vader says, "I feel a presence I have not felt since," but he doesn't actually finish the sentence, so that kind of leaves it open. In Return of the Jedi, Vader does say to Luke, "Obi-Wan once felt as you did," which again leaves it open. But when you see Obi-Wan Revenge of the Sith, he doesn't really try to turn Vader back to the light side, so in the context of Return of the Jedi, he must have been referring to the events that take place in the Obi-Wan show. Obi-Wan could set out on this quest to turn Vader back to the light, but we know he's going to fail.
I mean, there's always ambiguity around character meetings in Star Wars. See maybe some flashbacks with Hayden Christensen and Obi-Wan, perhaps even a Mustafar alternate ending if Obi-Wan's going into a Force vision. Marvel Comics touch upon this a bit, that he kind of loses his connection to the Force while he's on Tatooine, so I think that could be very nicely built upon in this. He could maybe foresee his death at the hands of Vader, retreat into the past. Perhaps we could see that meeting with Satine that was always hinted at during the Clone Wars. Plenty of possibilities, really.
I really personally want to see Liam Neeson coming back as a Force Ghost Qui-Gon, as that was actually set up in Revenge of the Sith. But Revenge of the Sith does seem to be setting up a sequel that never actually happened. I feel like Obi-Wan is that sequel. Qui-Gon has come back as a Force Ghost. He's finally figured out how to manifest himself physically in the Force, and basically Qui-Gon has to train Obi-Wan to do the same. Now, with the Obi-Wan show, we can finally see that story play out, and I guess that kind of ties into what you were saying, Ollie, about Obi-Wan losing touch with the Force. So maybe Qui-Gon could be someone who helps Obi-Wan regain that connection.
Of course, there's possibility for Force communication with Ahsoka or even Yoda, as Qui-Gon did, of course, visit Yoda in those final episodes of the Clone Wars Season 6.
I doubt we will see Ahsoka. It would be kind of cool to see Ahsoka and Obi-Wan meet again. I would only really like that if it does have an actual add weight to the story. Or we might see her, but possibly in a Force vision. I think we're definitely going to get flashbacks, like you said, definitely to the Clone Wars.
Obviously, Darth Maul is still about. They do meet in Rebels Season 3. Perhaps there can be a little bit of build-up to that. Obi-Wan, I think, has to remain on Tatooine throughout the course of this series, as he did make the promise to Padme.
Yeah, I don't think it would make sense for Obi-Wan and Vader's confrontation to take place on Tatooine. So if this confrontation should take place anywhere, I think it would be really poetic to see it take place on Mustafar again.
As Kathleen Kennedy said, this will be the rematch of the century. So we will have, returning performances from the original Ewan McGregor and Hayden Christensen, who is returning from the farm he retired to after 2005. So that is very nice to see. Nice to note that the logo, I think, was very well designed for this series. I think it kind of reflects Obi-Wan's deterioration from the Force when you see the sand wisping along the length of the logo. Reflects sandstorms of Tatooine mentioned in episode 1.
I have to admit, upon first seeing that logo, I did immediately think to myself, oh, that is such a to Anakin.
He does hate sand. It's rough,
Of course.
irritating, and it gets everywhere. We are joined by Brandon Rogers, a long-time colleague of OTH Studios. So hello to Brandon.
Hello, Mr. OTH Studios. Thank you for involving me in such an amazing project.
That's all right. It's a pleasure to have you here. We are starting with the Ahsoka standalone series coming exclusively again to Disney Plus in 2022, which will likely follow The Mandalorian Season 3 release. Very exciting series. So, Brandon, what are your thoughts?
I'm very excited for Ahsoka. I think she's a great character. Obviously, she started off in the Clone Wars. She wasn't necessarily a favorite, but then as we've seen her grow through the Clone Wars and Rebels, she's definitely worked her way into that favorite position.
It's interesting what you say about her character development, because way back in 2008, Clone Wars film and Clone Wars Season 1, the fans were in outrage over how stupid and silly this Anakin's apprentice is. Fast forward 10 years later, and she has become a very big fan favourite character to now receive her own series alongside the great Obi-Wan Kenobi. Originally hated characters with the correct treatment from Dave Filoni can develop very well.
The only issue I have really is that in live action, she didn't really translate well, in my opinion, mainly because of the stunts she'd have to perform. But I feel like even with restricting her Leku, as they're called, she still looked a little bit silly.
Rosario Dawson, I think she did a good job with what she was given. I don't really think anybody else would have been better for the job than her. But as you mentioned, we're so used to seeing the animated version of Ahsoka voiced by Ashley Eckstein that it just seemed a bit strange to see a live action version, and that's okay. It has to happen. I'm sure as we get used to this character, that feeling will subside. And the overall effect of episode 13 was great. I mean, the Chinese imagery of the Caledon forest worked very well. Very visually stunning, and one of the standout episodes of the series so far.
Definitely.
So it'll be good to see how Dave in the driving seat again for the new series. I think that he can be trusted with the character, as ultimately he is the one who knows her best.
I'm kind of scared for the series that this will take the same sort of path as Rebels, where the first season also was quite fillery, and I'm a little bit scared that that'll happen with Ahsoka for the first few. I know Mandalorian's had an issue with that, especially in the first season. Dave Filoni can work his little magic fingers to make this a good show, and I'm excited.
I think The Mandalorian, although it did have filler episodes like every TV series, I think none of it felt like fillers to me, except from episode 6, the New Republic prison episode. I thought that let down. But I think that I don't agree that will be the case with Ahsoka. I think there is plenty of places to take this narrative. As introduced in episode 13, Grand Admiral Thrawn got a very obvious mention, so Ahsoka is consciously tracking down Grand Admiral Thrawn. Now, he is a character filled with backstory and exciting potential. I've just finished reading the newer Thrawn trilogy, Thrawn Alliances, and Thrawn Treason. You can really see the development of this character from before Rebels, and post-Rebels, but there is many places which I think Ahsoka can go.
I agree. The only thing a little bit scared for with Thrawn and Ahsoka is that it may take away from the possible Rebels sequel that we've had speculated for quite a while now, as I'm a big fan of Rebels, and I don't really want Ahsoka to manhunt for Thrawn. I'd like that to be taken by other characters.
The missing Ezra Bridger, very possible that he would turn up in this new Ahsoka series, because I was very doubtful when all these names got dropped around just before Mandalorian Season 2, like Boba Fett and Ahsoka. I thought, no, that's not going to happen. But here we are, and it did happen, so I would even go as far to say that it is more than likely that we could see Grand Admiral Thrawn and Ezra Bridger return.
Very excited.
I like to look at the logos and the graphic design of these series, and you can see the Jedi Fallen Order meditation circle referenced as the main graphic of Ahsoka, so it's good to see that we're linking these Force abilities all throughout different multimedia projects.
I personally got a little hint of the World Between Worlds, the imagery from that in the logo as well, from Rebels once again, and I think that would be cool to explore possibly something like that, or see it in future Star Wars projects.
Yeah, exactly. If the potential from the World Between Worlds episode is exploited, we can visit all new eras, really. There's limitless possibilities. Them two Rebels episodes are only scratching the surface on what kind of scenarios these characters could be put in. Take any battle from Star Wars, and technically these characters can revisit that exact time and location. Many, many possibilities. There's a lot of opportunity to link in with Rangers of the New Republic, because Kathleen did say that they are both going to interlink with possibly a series finale. Did you pick up on that, Brandon?
I did not, but that does sound interesting.
Hello and welcome to Finlay McCall-Smith again, another returning guest to OTH Studios.
It's a pleasure to be here again.
It's very good to have you back, Finn. So we are going to begin with one of the later reveals of the Disney Investor Day. It is The Bad Batch. This is due to be released sometime in 2021. We have Dave Filoni returning, who obviously knows these animated characters very well and the overall animated formula. So Finn, what are your initial thoughts?
My initial thoughts are that this is just possibly one of the most incredible things. What we got was a carry-on from immediately after Order 66, following these characters that we'd gotten to see on the back end of the Clone Wars, which is obviously exciting because that four-parter did very well, and those characters seemed like they had an interesting dynamic. It was very obvious it was going to be explored at a later date. It's very much a boots-on-the-ground sort of perspective. Disney seems to really be going for at the moment is seeing their old projects from a different perspective. And it is a really interesting concept. I mean, you've got returning characters from all sorts of places.
Fennec Shand.
Fennec Shand, played by Ming-Na Wen. You'll be able to see a little more about her character before the events even of The Mandalorian. Maybe Cody appearing in the series, which would be a really, really interesting idea.
Yeah, how he makes that transition into the Stormtrooper Corps. That's something fans have been wanting to see for a very long time. And finally...
Exactly.
It may be coming. But I must say, my initial reaction was probably a bit more downbeat to that of yours, because I think people need to remember that The Clone Wars Season 6 was incomplete, Season 7 was also incomplete, so we're essentially missing 2.5 seasons of the original run of The Clone Wars, and these missing episodes are completely scripted, they are roughly animated, so it won't take a lot for Disney to just finish them, whack them on Disney+. But they seem to be taking their own approach, which I do understand, and that is in the form of The Bad Batch. As you mentioned, this transition to the Empire wouldn't have been seen in the originally envisioned Clone Wars, so I'm very glad we are seeing it now. This transition is being embodied with the likes of Tarkin, the speech from the Emperor, directly into Episode 3. I think the Bad Batch may even mirror the response of the Legends Omega Squadron of ARC Troopers. Now, they didn't participate in Order 66, but maybe the Bad Batch will be the same. Great continuity from the trailer. We can see the Kamino training referenced, so maybe how the clone troopers will then become stormtroopers on Kamino. We see their armor become more white, less of the individuality through the different paint applications we saw during the Clone Wars. There's returns of Zygerian slaves, Fennec Shand, as you mentioned, and possible planets, including Edu, Felucia, Kashyyyk, Anaxis, seen in Rebels as well, and Bracca from Jedi Fallen Order.
We still can't even really work out what the story is going to be about, and more importantly, where the Bad Batch will hold their allegiances in terms of whether they'll be on the side of the rebellion, on the side of the Empire. This current point in time, there isn't really anything of a rebellion. Also, with their defect, their chips perhaps don't work and thus don't agree killing off all of the Jedi. Maybe the entire show is a Jedi hunting show, or maybe they're not included at all.
And if they have no allegiance to the rebellion or the Empire, they become a bounty hunting group. Maybe Cad Bane will come back, Boba Fett. Both had unfinished business in the later seasons of the Clone Wars. That is very exciting. On to another reveal of Disney Investor Day. It is the Andor series, which should be coming to Disney Plus in 2022. This will be directed by Toby Haynes, who you might be familiar with from Sherlock, Brexit, The Uncivil War, and some episodes of Doctor Who, all of which I have seen. We will also have returning performances from Genevieve O'Reilly, who portrayed the fan favourite of Mon Mothma in Rogue One, and Stellan Skarsgård, who many of you will know from thought?
Initially, when I first heard this, we were getting a Cassian Andor series. I wasn't really too hyped, and that is simply because, well, I do really enjoy Rogue One. The characters had basically no development, particularly Cassian Andor, despite that one line of dialogue where he says he's been in this fight since he was 6 years old. So I was very surprised when I found out that he was getting his own series. I have to say my excitement has increased. I do really like the premise. I like that it's going to be a Star Wars spy thriller, and I'm also very excited to know that they are going to be exploring the darker side of the Rebellion. The Rebellion aren't these perfect heroes. It was pretty interesting to see Cassian kind of killing that guy, maybe even see Cassian's transformation into the person he is in Rogue One. That will be really interesting, because if the show could really start off Cassian, maybe he wants to be a hero, but then his work with the Rebellion, maybe we could see that transformation into that almost emotionless guy.
We will definitely be seeing some of those more gritty, darker elements touched upon in Rogue One. Wouldn't be surprised if there's no Force wielders in this show, no kind of magic to speak of. I think that'll really increase the real worldness of it.
They've got an opportunity here to tell a really unique story. I feel like having a Jedi would kind of take away from that.
But instead, I think there'll be a much greater emphasis upon the criminal underworld you mentioned. The Ring of Catherine, obviously where Cassian Andor made the kill of that informant. The Wobani labor camp, where the Juggernaut was seen, a nice link to the Clone Wars there, along with Saw Gerrera's partisans, with Two Tubes, Ibiza Fortuna, and Saw Gerrera himself.
I'd really like to see what drove that wedge between Saw Gerrera and the Rebel Alliance. Like how he sort of got from where he is in Clone Wars to where he is in Rogue One.
That was definitely touched upon within the Rebels Rising book, along with the Inferno Squad book. They both revealed that this is a very interesting group of characters, and I'm sure that they will at least be mentioned within this new series. And it's also good to see Diego Luna behind the protagonist. He will be executive producing, and I think he brings an excellent attitude to Star Wars, so it's good to see he will be having some more involvement.
I think with Andor, they've got the perfect opportunity to finally give him development and actually give him an arc, which could either conclude in the finale of the Andor series or conclude in Rogue One. Either way, it will make his story in Rogue One much more meaningful.
So moving on to a later reveal of the Disney Investor Day, we have got Lando, a new series also coming to Disney Plus. There is very little known about this series, so Brandon, what are your thoughts?
I'm actually rather excited for this one because I'm a big fan of Donald Glover through his music and acting career, and I actually quite like the character and how he portrayed it in Solo, and I like the style and tone of Solo with the music and cinematography.
Everybody would like to see Donald Glover return. I think he's got quite a big fan base. Lando is a character filled with rich potential, I think. His first canonical appearance was in Solo, through to Rebels, through to Episode 9. So, there's potential for Donald Glover to represent Lando, plus Billy D. Williams and any other actors to flesh out all those narrative events.
The Rise of Skywalker, Luke and Lando looking into the Sith bounty man. And I think it'd be really interesting to see that.
We had the suggestion that Lando had a daughter. I didn't really follow that. I think that was a bit of a weird decision for JJ to take very towards the end of the time frame to explore. But I mean, anything is open for possibilities. So as I mentioned, Lando is a very long-reaching character. So from everything to Rebels to Solo, original trilogy, sequel trilogy. He's even in the Star Wars mainline Marvel comics, which explore some quite interesting developments, so continuity there. He also has split book between Han and Lando and L337 called Last Shot, which was a very good read. Interestingly, I thought the Lando logo was actually quite similar to the Solo one with that kind of neon vibe about it. So what would you kind of like to see?
In terms of the actual series, I would like to see some interlinking with Han, so with the actor that portrayed him in Solo. As far as music goes, because we've had a lot of good music in The Mandalorian recently.
I started off not thinking that the music fit. Obviously, it's a very different kind of show, The Mandalorian, very Western inspired. But I think over time, the music of The Mandalorian has grown on me. Just today, it was going around my head all day.
Ludwig Göransson, I think it's pronounced, who scored that, has actually worked with Donald Glover before on some of his albums.
Yes, one of the only things we do know about Lando so far is the director, which is Justin Simien. Now, he directed the very critically acclaimed and successful Dear White People, which was on Netflix from 2017 to present for 3 very successful seasons, I have no doubt that he will introduce some very progressive and interesting ideas to Star Wars today. Out of all the releases here, I think Lando is not to be underestimated for where this story could go. Another release from the Disney Investor Day, it is Rangers of the New Republic, which will also be executive produced by Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau. This should be coming at the end of next year, 2021.
Seems like at the moment, especially Dave Filoni, but also Jon Favreau, have their fingers all over.
Fingers in many pies.
Exactly. So the fact that they are going to be spearheading a few of these shows is very exciting. I mean, Rangers of the New Republic, the show may follow a few of the characters from Mandalorian. You can see there's lots of different ways that all of the characters from this season are going to go. It's also an interesting time period as well, because it is one of the most unexplored ones since you had that time jump from episode 6 to 7.
I agree. There's probably about a decade's worth of in-universe time there to be explored. I mean, that could include the hidden rise of the First Order in the unknown regions, Battle of Jakku, both of which could link to the very good canon books of Bloodline and the Aftermath trilogy, both of which explore how the New Republic gains power through great difficulty, and the Galactic Concordance, which shows how the Empire slowly became the First Order.
With this and the Ahsoka series now and the continuation of The Mandalorian, you could always have these shows go off in several different directions and then reconvene at one point.
And Rangers of the New Republic obviously was announced alongside Ahsoka at the Investor Day, and it seems that both of these will have very interlinked timelines, so much so that at the finale of both seasons, Ahsoka will directly finish with Rangers of the New Republic, so the finale will encompass both episodes, like I think some series of Marvel used to do back in the day.
At the end of the show Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., it seems like a lot of the actors have carried over into Star Wars projects. Even Ming-Na Wen herself was a main protagonist in that show. Pedro Pascal is supposed to be making an appearance in Rangers of the New Republic.
Yeah, along with Cara Dune as well. She's rumoured to be one of the protagonists.
Maybe Carl Weathers' character as well.
Reef Karga, but I think it's only natural that they spread their talents among similar projects. On to one of my most anticipated reveals of the Disney Investor Day. It is the Acolyte series coming to Disney Plus in 2023, directed by Leslie Headland, who is the co-creator of the very successful Netflix mystery thriller Russian Doll. This is going to be a really great addition to Star Wars, because one of my favorite genres is the mystery thriller genre, and I've often thought this would be perfectly translated into Star Wars. And Acolyte itself means follower of a religion. This could either focus upon a devoted Jedi group or even a dark side surviving remnant who are kind of fighting against the Jedi from the shadows. These elements are the makings of a perfect thriller.
This is almost certainly going to be about the Sith, and I say that because Acolyte is the term used to describe the Padawan equivalent of a Sith. So my theory is that this is going to be a Sith Lord who is looking for a new apprentice and adopts a Jedi Padawan at the time as their acolyte and infiltrating the Jedi from the inside. And I think that potentially could be a really amazing story. It could give us what I feel the prequel trilogy didn't give us, and actually give us a really convincing story of a Jedi turning to the dark side.
You don't think Anakin's story was convincing?
For me, it wasn't, purely because the only movie that really focused properly on his turn to the dark side was Revenge of the Sith. And while we got hints of that in Attack of the Clones...
Episode 2, the killing of the Tusken Raiders, the death of his mother, Obi-Wan not actually wanting to train him, Qui-Gon dying.
The reason his turn to the dark side in Revenge of the Sith felt rushed to me was that Revenge of the Sith was the only movie that actually focused on his conflict.
Yeah, I mean, this will definitely flesh out some new characters and offer a finale to the High Republic era. This will kind of be began early next year with a slate of new comics and books books. And I think this is kind of the Disney equivalent of the Old Republic. So I think there's quite a lot to live up to. I know a lot of fans will be expecting certain things. It may or may not be a good thing if Disney goes off in a separate direction, but we will have to wait and see.
I do really like the concept of the High Republic. I have to admit, it's very interesting that the first piece of on-screen media we're seemingly getting for the High Republic is the very end of it. I do find that a bit odd in terms of storytelling decisions, but then again, we are getting loads of books and comics. I am really, really excited for it, so hopefully it's good.
It makes you wonder if Taika Waititi's untitled film may perhaps explore this era. Obviously, there is 3 years of development in books and comics before The Acolyte is released. And maybe with Taika Waititi's film around the same time, perhaps that would fill in some more of the gaps, possibly.
I don't really want it to take place in the High Republic or really any era of Star Wars that we know personally. I also don't think that Taika Waititi is going to do that, especially if it's been described as a completely new take.
Definitely be very exciting. And now to some people's probably favourite reveal of the Disney Investor Day. We have got the next feature film for Star Wars. It is Rogue Squadron, which will be released in December 2023 by Patty Jenkins.
Seems now we've also gotten a DC director, which
We
is
have.
Obviously Patty Jenkins is very, very famous. So the way I think that this film may go is that it will have another female lead. That seems to be the way that Disney are favoring it at the moment, which, to be honest, I'm completely up for, because Rey worked quite well.
As for characters, I think there's a lot of potential there, because this is going to be post-episode 9. As Kathleen Kennedy says, this will be the future era of Star Wars. So this could possibly include surviving members of Black Squadron, that is the elite starfighter squadron in the sequel trilogy. Those surviving members would be Poe Dameron, Jessica Pava, and Kari Kun, who are explored in the Black Squadron comic. So maybe they will join Rogue Squadron, or maybe it will be completely new characters. The style of this film will be maybe similar to Rogue One, follow a kind of war grittiness, or follow up on the nostalgia of the original trilogy and the original Rogue Squadron pilots. I'm sure many fans would love to see that.
It's also coming off of the back of the Squadron Star Wars game. Generally, with the popularity of that game, starfighters seem to be coming back into the public eye. And I mean, who doesn't love watching the X-Wings and the TIE fighters? And we haven't really gotten to see much of that in the sequel trilogy, other than a few Falcon scenes.
There were quite a few starfighter fights, I think, in every film. You've got Crate in Episode 8, the Takodana and Starkiller Base fight in Episode 7, and Episode 9, the big Exegol fight.
Exactly, yeah. But they also had a focus on the battles that were going on the ground as well.
You are correct.
Which the Crate battle were actually on the ground as well.
Well, the big laser and Rose saving Finn, which was rarely breathtaking, and I had to hold back a tear at that moment.
When they kissed, I don't think I held back my tears.
I can't, just thinking about it. I think I might need to take a break.
Executed. I do have faith in Patty Jenkins.
She uses a very bold 80s visual style, particularly in Wonder Woman 1984. That will translate well into Star Wars, just because Star Wars is synonymous with bold genres, Western inspired and the such, in The Mandalorian even. I think she will make a very beautifully crafted and well cohesive film. So moving on to the second feature film reveal of Disney Investor Day, we have got the currently untitled, not a release date set in stone yet, the Taika Waititi reveal.
I'm actually a big fan of Taika Waititi. I think he's a great director. He works well with like old visual styles and tones, which we saw in Ragnarok with like an 80s theme, and I think that'd be very welcome in Star Wars.
Yeah, I mean, Star Wars is obviously a very visually bold universe. You can translate it to anything, really. And to quote Kathleen Kennedy, she says Taika will bring a fresh, unexpected, and unique take to Star Wars. So you and Kathleen are obviously thinking the same thing. Taika Waititi, obviously, he has experience with Star Wars, directing Episode 8 of The Mandalorian, the big finale, and voicing IG-11. Episode 8 is not my favourite Mandalorian episode. I think people get hung up on that it is the finale, so it's the best.
I wrote in my notes here, sometimes once again in Ragnarok, the comedy may have been taken a little bit far, and I'm kind of scared that we'd somehow get that put into the new film. So we've seen it before in other films like The Last Jedi with the infamous slapper of a joke, "Your mother," which I believe Poe says to Hux.
Just like Kathleen, we are also thinking alike, Brandon, because in my notes here we have, and I quote, "Comedy in Star Wars must be closely checked and not overpowering." So obviously in Thor Ragnarok, a very good film, which I need to see again. The comedy worked perfectly in that, so I think he can translate his comedy formula very well, which did work in The Mandalorian, and it did work in the MCU. And he is co-writing and directing, so Taika will have a increased level of freedom over this project, so with less minds clashing, as I think was the case with Solo and Episode 9, a more beautiful and successful project. So we will move on. It is a droid story.
I am in love with the characters of R2-D2 and C-3PO. I've loved them ever since I first watched A New Hope. I just don't think it's really something I can personally get excited for. It just seems kind of pointless. I don't really know if I want to see an R2-D2 and C-3PO show, if I'm being honest. I just don't think that they can carry a show on their own, which is probably why they've introduced a new hero. But even then, the title droid suggests that they are going to be the main characters.
As you mentioned, R2-D2 and C-3PO are fan favorite characters, been around since 1977. With the addition of a new hero, perhaps they will be able to hold their own, but I do understand where you're coming from. 3 droids is a little bit one-sided. Both of these have been explored in detail, I think, through the years in books and comics. Even the Star Tours ride VR projects, I think, have centered upon droids. Maybe it'll be more comedic, more action-orientated, probably not as interesting or revolutionary projects as some of the others, but maybe that's a good thing. Maybe sometimes it's good to have a bit more light-hearted entertainment.
I completely agree, and this show could be excellent. I could be completely wrong. I will still watch it regardless, but in terms of excitement, it's definitely the lowest in my ranking of how excited I am for what was announced at the Disney Investors Day.
So, moving on to the last point of discussion for today, we have got Star Wars Visions, which is due to be released in 2021 with 10 anime-styled shorts from world-leading artists.
Yeah, so this one's a very interesting approach for Disney to take. They're trying to cover all ground at the moment, especially at this Investors Day. It became very obvious that they were cherry picking the people who were the best at their thing.
A lot of people are kind of cautious of the anime style, but I think if done correctly, it can look very stunning and kind of different to everything that has come before in Star Wars. I think Resistance was kind of halfway down that track, reminiscent of this art form, but it never really went all the way, which may have been the right decision. Yeah, I think it will offer something very new, and I'm quite excited for this.
Yeah, they will have to be careful, though, I think, because if it is the method of animated short that they're going for, I've watched all of Forces of Destiny.
Forces of Destiny was primarily a kids' TV show aimed at girls.
Not exactly their demographic, I agree. Going with the idea of shorts, it just seemed like a thing that you can't really enjoy.
Clone Wars was 20 minutes long. That was successful.
There was a large amount of the Clone Wars, though.
I think also shorts could easily be defined as half an hour. Some episodes of The Mandalorian are only just over half an hour. People aren't complaining about The Mandalorian. Also, from the Disney Investor Day live stream, behind Kathleen Kennedy, I noticed the graphics she had on the wall. And one of them pictures showed a older Jedi teaching a younger Padawan. Obviously, these may just be concept art and not at all adopted in the final cut. But I think that would be quite an interesting topic to explore. I think it's always interesting to gain an insight into the Padawan training regime. And on the other picture behind Kathleen, we kind of saw some feminine fashion or hairdressing, and this reminded me of the kind of Naboo fashion and everything we saw in episode 1. That was quite breathtaking. So something focusing upon Naboo, I think, would be very interesting, especially the decade-long gap between episode 1 and 2. Naboo was very prominent within that time frame with the controversy of Valorum and Palpatine and the Trade Federation and overall galactic politics at that point. So it'd be nice to consider.
Most of the Star Wars planets would perfectly encapsulate the sort of anime style.
What Star Wars does well, I think, is the very striking design of each planet. They very easily stand out from one another. One of the main things that George Lucas wanted in episode 3 was, he always said, when I look at that planet, I need to know know what it is that it's Star Wars, and I think most of the time that has held up in the Disney era.
I can certainly tell the difference between Jakku and Tatooine.
Well, you
Definitely
can.
been
Jakku is
upgraded.
predominantly a starship graveyard. Tatooine, a kind of washed-up, Western-inspired sandy planet.
You're not wrong. I mean, the style will fit Star Wars well.
We will see next year.